Her species always walked through the station halls like they floated, but she moved differently whenever I showed up. The Lithri had this serene, disciplined, monk-like aura, silent steps, graceful posture, eyes half-lidded as if they were meditating even while carrying trays of glowing crystals. Meanwhile, I was the human maintenance tech in a grease-stained uniform, trying not to trip over cables. The contrast was ridiculous. Every time I passed by, their collective composure cracked like thin glass. They would twitch, stiffen, and widen their luminous eyes at me as if I'd just fired a flare gun in a cathedral. I once thought maybe humans just looked weird to them, hairy, round-eared, clumsy bipeds. But apparently there was something else. Something that made them react like startled deer every time I existed within 5 meters. I didn't understand it at first. I thought I was being polite, nodding, greeting, not touching anything delicate or sacred. I didn't burp in public. I didn't leave tools scattered. I didn't even use strong deodorant. And yet, the moment I walked into a corridor, the Lithri would suddenly freeze mid-step, clutching their robes, or make these tiny gasping sounds like a kitten being sneezed on. Some even dropped ceremonial objects, crystal bowls, ancient scrolls, shimmering petals that floated for 3 seconds before dissolving into light. One particularly dramatic elder fainted when I said, "Good morning," too close to her ear. I kept asking myself, what am I doing wrong? Am I radiating some kind of aggressive earthling energy? Do they hate oxygen? Is my face offensive? But no one gave me an answer. They just stared, trembled, shuffled away, and whispered behind their spiraling tattoos. Eventually, I learned to ignore it and just did my job: fix air filtration ducts, repair gravity stabilizers, clean the gym equipment because apparently no one else on the station knew how to maintain a treadmill. The only one who didn't ignore me was her. The alien beauty with silver blue skin, deep violet eyes, and hair like braided meteor trails. A high-ranking priestess in training. Revered. Untouchable. Wrapped in layers of ceremonial cloth that always looked like liquid moonlight. She was practically the poster child for celibacy. Her vow was legendary among her people. Whispered about withal. Guarded like a sacred flame. She wasn't just not allowed to be with anyone, she had sworn never to even be tempted. And I, apparently, was the worst kind of temptation imaginable. The first time I walked past her in the Great Hall, she physically stumbled. She didn't trip, she stumbled. Like gravity forgot how to behave for a moment. Her attendants gasped. I apologized immediately, thinking I'd brushed her or stepped too close. But she blamed her sandal. Lithri sandals don't have straps. Or soles. They float slightly above the skin. They cannot slip. That should have been my first clue. Second clue, she started avoiding me. No, not avoiding, fleeing. If she sensed me entering a hall, she pivoted with military precision and vanished behind the nearest door. If I walked toward a lift, she would gracefully glide to another one, pretending she had prior commitments. If we accidentally locked eyes, she would turn scarlet. Well, the Lithri version of scarlet, this shimmering violet flush across her throat, and sprint away as if chased by plasma fire. I thought maybe she despised humans. Or maybe she was shy. Or allergic. Or telepathically sensitive to sarcasm. I had no idea. What I didn't know, what no human ever suspected, was that humans gave off a biological signal her species interpreted as a glowing neon mating beacon. We couldn't see it. Humans were blissfully clueless, walking around like normal organisms. But to the Lithri, human pheromones didn't smell subtle or mild, they appeared visually. Bright. Pulsing. Obvious. Loud. A shimmering, "Take me!" sign floating in the air around our bodies. A cosmic mating advertisement we couldn't turn off. And no one bothered to warn me. So every time I strolled past her, she was basically being ambushed by a blinding, seductive fog of human musk she couldn't unsee. No wonder she panicked. No wonder her attendants whispered. No wonder she ran. She was trying to preserve her vow of celibacy, and I was involuntarily blasting her with temptation at maximum volume like a malfunctioning pheromone megaphone. Still, I didn't learn any of this until later. At the time, I just thought Lithri are strange. Beautiful, but strange. One day, after a long maintenance shift, I decided to hit the gym. It was small, tucked away near the lower decks, usually empty except for me. I liked working out. It cleared my head, loosened my muscles, and gave me a break from deciphering alien schematics. I had no idea that the gym's ventilation system connected directly to her private quarters. No one thought to mention that. I guess when you're surrounded by species that don't sweat or breathe hard, gym ventilation isn't considered a threat. So there I was, doing push-ups, breathing deeply, sweating like a normal human. Completely unaware that every molecule of my scent was being sucked into ducts, funneled through glowing crystal filtration tubes, amplified somehow, and delivered directly into her room like a concentrated pheromone missile. While I worked out, she was probably meditating, chanting, or reciting her celibacy vows. Meanwhile, swirling clouds of human aura were pouring through her wall vents, lighting up her entire chamber like a storm of neon desire. And she must have felt it. All of it. Intensely. More intensely than anything she'd ever experienced. Somewhere, in her dimly lit sanctum, her vow must have shattered. Because from what I later heard, she jolted upright, eyes wide, breathing fast, pupils blown wide with instinct. Her attendants panicked and asked what was happening, and she probably tried to maintain dignity for all of 3 seconds. But then she must have made a decision, an impulsive, desperate, instinct-driven one. She left her quarters. She marched down the corridor. And she was heading straight for me. I just didn't know it yet. She must have tried everything to keep control, breathing rituals, chanting ancient vows, meditating in front of those floating crystal orbs. Maybe she paced her room with her hands clasped behind her back, whispering to herself that discipline was stronger than instinct. But none of it mattered, not when the ventilation kept pushing more of my scent in like invisible waves. I didn't know it, but every drop of sweat dripping down my neck was basically a tactical pheromone strike on her self-control. Meanwhile, I was in the gym, finishing another set of push-ups, humming some off-key Earth tune, thinking I was alone like usual. I wiped my forehead with a towel, exhaled, and went for another round, completely unaware that my aura, as she called it later, was saturating her entire living space. Somewhere across the hall, she was probably gripping the edge of her meditation platform, breathing unevenly, trying not to collapse into a trembling heap of desire. Her vow of celibacy must have been screaming in her mind, a sacred oath she had trained for years to uphold. But instinct, especially this kind, was louder. According to what I learned later, the moment the smell intensified, she froze like a startled animal. Her eyes dilated, ears twitching, tattoos glowing brighter. She staggered a little, scrambling upright with this wild look in her eyes. Her attendants tried to block the door, terrified of what breaking her vow might mean, but she shoved past them like she'd suddenly developed super strength fueled by panic and pheromones. One of them yelped, another fainted, and a third shrieked something about the sacred discipline breaking at last. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was that 1 second I was doing my workout, and the next there was a thunderous, determined stomping sound echoing down the corridor. Heavy, purposeful, fast. I thought maybe the station had an emergency. Maybe a fire, a breach, a reactor issue. I stood up, grabbed my towel, and turned toward the door just as it slid open with a hiss. And there she was. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly, her eyes glowing like twin stars, her robes disheveled in a way I'd never seen before. She looked like she was halfway between celestial goddess and wild animal. Her gaze locked onto me with a focus so intense it nearly knocked me backward. I blinked slowly, confused and startled. Before I could say anything, she lunged forward, gripping my shirt collar with both hands and yanking me closer. Her strength shocked me. She wasn't huge, but she dragged me like I weighed nothing. Her face hovered inches from mine, her breath trembling. "Your aura is too strong," she gasped, her voice lower and thicker than usual. "Come with me. Now." I stared at her, towel in hand, sweat dripping down my neck. Excuse me?" That was all I managed before she yanked hard on my collar, nearly dragging me off my feet. I stumbled after her, trying not to fall flat on my face while she marched forward like a woman possessed. The gym doors slid shut behind us as she pulled me into a hallway, her fingers locked onto me with iron determination. Her attendants were right outside the gym, screaming and running in circles like panicked birds. When they saw her dragging me, they froze, jaws dropping. One pointed and shrieked, "She has chosen! She has chosen the human!" Another wailed, "The vow is broken! The vow is broken! Prepare the chambers!" I froze mid-step, confused, horrified, and slightly concerned about my own survival. Chosen? Chambers? What? Wait, what's happening? But she wasn't listening. Her grip tightened, and she pulled harder, dragging me down the hall like a kid hauling a giant plush toy. It would have been comical if it weren't so terrifying. Every Lithri we passed reacted dramatically, dropping crystals, gasping, fainting, or scuttling out of the way. A few stared in awe, whispering urgently to each other in their melodic language. Some made gestures I assumed were blessings or warding signs. All I could manage was, "Could we maybe talk about this? In a calm, rational manner?" "Impossible," she muttered, voice breathy. "Your aura is destabilizing my discipline. You must be isolated immediately." "I'm dangerous?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Extremely." That was not reassuring. She practically dragged me around a corner, down a long curved corridor lined with glowing murals. Doors slid open automatically as she passed, her movements frantic yet purposeful. 2 more attendants spotted us and dropped to their knees, chanting something about the sacred union being ignited. One of them held up a ceremonial shawl as if about to drape it over us, but she swatted it away with a furious glare. "No rituals yet," she snapped. "I must neutralize him first." "Neutralize?" I froze mid-stride. "Neutralize?" But she didn't answer. Her focus was fully on getting me inside her private quarters before her body betrayed her vow any further. With a final tug, she dragged me through a curved archway into her chamber, and the door slammed shut behind us with a dramatic hiss. The sudden silence was deafening. I stood there panting, shirt collar stretched sideways, her hands still gripping the fabric. She stared at me, chest heaving, pupils blown wide. Her breathing sounded almost shaky, her voice a whisper of desperation. "Do not move," she said softly. "Do not speak. Do not breathe so deeply. I am barely holding myself together." I swallowed hard. "Should I be worried?" She squeezed her eyes shut like she was in pain. "Yes." Outside, I heard attendants screaming instructions, hurried footsteps, frantic chants. Someone shouted about preparing sacred oils. Another yelled that the stars were aligning faster than expected. Meanwhile, I was staring at the alien beauty who had just kidnapped me, dragged me through the station, and locked us inside her room, all because I apparently smelled too good. I opened my mouth to speak, but she snapped her eyes open and pointed a trembling finger at me. "Not another word." Then she turned away, smoothing her robes, trying to regain calm that clearly wasn't returning. I had no idea that this was only the beginning of the chaos. She kept her back turned to me for a long moment, shoulders rising and falling with deep, shaky breaths. Her hands were clenched, then unclenched, then clenched again, like she was trying to crush invisible stress in her palms. I stood awkwardly in the middle of her quarters, shirt collar stretched, sweat dripping down my neck. The room itself was unlike anything I'd seen: dim, soft swirling lights along the ceiling, floating cushions, glowing crystals lining the walls. Everything looked serene and sacred, except for the part where she had dragged a sweaty human into it like she was hiding contraband under her robes. I hesitated. She had told me not to move, not to breathe too deeply, not to exist in a way that might make things worse. But my lungs insisted on doing their job, and I slowly inhaled, not realizing I was just making the air thicker with what she considered dangerous. Her back stiffened instantly. "Stop that." "I stop what?" "That." she whispered sharply without turning. That breathing. It is too warm. Too concentrated. I blinked, utterly lost. I don't know how to breathe less. She made a frustrated sound that was almost a growl, then finally turned around. Her face was flushed and luminous violet, her chest rising quickly. She approached slowly, eyes fixed on me like she was facing a powerful but unstable creature. You do not understand, she said softly. Humans emit visible pheromone energy. It is like watching a beacon pulse in front of my eyes. When you perspire, it intensifies. When you exert yourself, it radiates. When you breathe heavily, it becomes overwhelming. So, I said, confused, me working out is like flashing giant signs at you. She winced. Flashing? Blinding. Deafening. Screaming. It is the loudest temptation I have ever endured. I swallowed, unsure if I should be flattered or terrified. I wasn't trying to. I know, she said quickly, raising her hands as if to calm me. You are not at fault. But my physiology reacts regardless. Every step you take sends visual pulses through the air. Every drop of sweat bursts like a firework in my senses. Standing this close to you right now is difficult. She wasn't exaggerating. Her hands trembled slightly. Her gaze kept flicking away, then back to me, unable to settle. Her whole posture seemed caught between fleeing and pouncing. Instinct versus discipline, battling visibly beneath her skin. I dragged you here, she continued, voice low, to isolate your aura and prevent a public breakdown. That's what that was. It was either that or collapse in the hallway, she muttered. And collapsing in front of my attendants would be unthinkable. They would interpret it as acceptance of courtship. Or worse, surrender to instinct. I exhaled slowly, which was apparently the wrong move. She inhaled sharply, stepping back like the air had hit her in the face. Please, she whispered. Try to remain still. I am still. Then stop being alive so loudly. I had no idea how to respond to that, so I stayed frozen like a statue, arms awkwardly at my sides. She paced in front of me in tense circles, muttering to herself about centering her spirit and restoring inner balance. But every time she passed close enough to catch another wave of my scent, she flinched and resumed pacing in the opposite direction. Finally, she tried to take a deep, meditative breath, only to nearly wobble as if the air itself was dizzying. I stepped forward instinctively to steady her. Big mistake. The moment I reached out, she froze like prey caught in a spotlight. Her eyes widened. Her breath hitched. My hand barely brushed her arm, but her reaction was immediate and dramatic. Her tattoos flashed from pale silver to bright violet. Do not touch me, she breathed. Your aura amplifies on contact. I wasn't trying to. Just stand there. She gestured vaguely toward a spot on the floor, like she was placing a volatile artifact. No closer. No sudden movements. I complied, but she still swayed slightly, trying to center herself. She pressed a hand to her forehead, fingers trembling, muttering something about forbidden temptations and discipline unraveling. Then, without warning, she stepped close, far too close, and examined my face with intense scrutiny. I must find a way to neutralize this aura, she said, thinking aloud. Perhaps if I dilute it. Or shield myself. Or disrupt the scent patterns. How do you do that? I do not know, she burst out, then immediately winced at her own outburst. I am improvising. She tried several methods in the next few minutes, each more ridiculous than the last. First, she attempted fanning the air between us with a ceremonial scroll, which only seemed to spread the scent around faster. Then she rummaged through a drawer and tried holding a glowing crystal between us like a barrier, but it started humming in a way that made her panic and throw it onto a cushion. Next, she tried turning away and covering her nose, only to peek back at me every few seconds with a helpless little noise that sounded equal parts curious and tortured. Finally, she pressed a hand to her chest, closing her eyes as if struggling to breathe. This is not working. Your presence is affecting me too strongly. I kept my voice low. Do you want me to leave? Her eyes snapped open instantly. No! She caught herself, paused, then spoke more carefully. I mean, if you leave now, the attendants might assume I rejected you, which could trigger a diplomatic incident. They are already convinced we have initiated a courtship sequence. What does that mean exactly? It means, she sighed, that they believe we are bonding. Her face flushed deeply. Romantically. I stared. We are literally just standing here. To them, she said, this is extremely intimate. Outside the door, distant murmuring grew louder, attendants chanting, elders reciting blessings, footsteps pacing anxiously. I heard someone yell about preparing the sacred oils again, followed by what sounded like a struggle. She winced. They are preparing the ritual. What ritual? The bonding ceremony, she muttered miserably. They think it has already begun. But it hasn't. She looked at me, eyes wide, glowing, vulnerable. They do not know that. Then, more softly, she added, and I do not know if I want them to. Her voice trembled with a mixture of fear and desire. Her gaze softened. The tension shifted from chaotic panic to something warmer, more dangerous. She stepped closer, just an inch, but enough to feel the warmth between us. Enough to see her resolve melting. I held still, barely breathing, and she whispered, Do not leave me. She stood so close that I could feel the faint warmth radiating off her skin, even though her people were usually cool to the touch. Her breathing had steadied, but only barely, each inhale a quiet tremor that she tried, and failed, to hide. The violet glow along her tattoos pulsed in time with her heartbeat, flickering rapidly like starlight caught in motion. She looked torn between instinct and duty, between fear of breaking her vow and fear of letting me walk away. And for the first time since she had dragged me into her quarters, I understood just how much pressure she was under. Not from me, though I apparently wasn't helping, but from the expectations her people had built around her. She backed up a few inches, as if trying to reclaim some space between us, but then took it back in the very next second, like distance only made things worse. She opened her mouth to speak, closed it again, then pressed her palm to her forehead with a frustrated sigh. I need clarity, she murmured. I need discipline. I need less of my aura, I offered weakly. She shot me a look that was half exasperation, half helpless longing. What I need, she said slowly, is to understand why being near you feels like I'm standing inside a supernova. She stepped away and paced again, hands twisting in the fabric of her robe. This has never happened before. Not with any species. Not even with my own people. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Why must it be a human? I didn't plan this, I said quietly. She let out a humorless laugh. Neither did I. I trained for years to maintain control. To remain untouched. To be a symbol of purity and discipline. She waved her hands in small circles, as if gesturing at everything she had built her life on. My vow was not just personal, it was cultural. Generational. My people looked to me for guidance, for restraint, for an example of what it means to transcend instinct. She stopped pacing and faced me again. And then you arrived. Sorry? I tried, unsure if it was an apology or a joke. Her expression softened. Do not apologize. You did nothing wrong. It is simply biology. Fate. Terrible ventilation engineering. She walked toward the wall and pressed a palm to a panel. A faint hum vibrated through the room as some kind of shielding engaged, causing the air to shimmer faintly. She inhaled cautiously, then nodded. This should reduce the concentration. Enough for me to think without feeling like I am about to lose consciousness. She turned back to me, calmer now, though the glow of her tattoos still betrayed how much she was holding back. With slow steps she approached, hands clasped behind her as if returning to ceremonial posture. She stopped only a foot away, close enough to study me without being overwhelmed. I dragged you into my quarters because I panicked, she said softly. But also because part of me wanted to. That admission surprised even her. She flinched slightly, eyes widening like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. I swallowed. You wanted to? She nodded once, slow, purposeful. I have never felt anything like this. Not attraction. Not desire. Not temptation. Her gaze dipped to the floor, embarrassed. I did not know my body could react this way. My vow was meant to guard against weakness, yet you made my whole world tilt with a single breath. I stepped closer, cautiously, watching her reaction. She tensed, but didn't step back. Instead, she lifted her eyes to meet mine, full of shimmering conflict. You don't have to break your vow, I said quietly. Not for me. Not because of biology. Not because of pressure from outside. Her eyes softened. But I want to understand it. I want to understand you. The room felt smaller suddenly. Warmer. The air thickened with unspoken tension, even with the shielding active. She breathed slowly, as if trying to test her limits without letting instinct run wild. What happens now? I asked gently. Her lips parted, a delicate hesitation. That depends on what you want. I took another step, closing the space between us completely. She drew in a sharp breath, her tattoos flaring briefly before dimming to a quieter glow. She didn't move away this time. If anything, she leaned in, just slightly. I want you to feel safe, I said. Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. And if I want more than safety? Then we go slowly, I said. At your pace. With your choice. Not because your attendants think something happened. Not because they're preparing oils or rituals. Not because I accidentally lit up the air around you like a mating festival. That earned a laugh, small, breathless, but genuine. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time since entering the room. She reached up with hesitant fingers and touched my wrist, as though testing her own reaction. When nothing catastrophic happened, she exhaled shakily. This is manageable, she murmured. In this small amount. With control. With trust. Her hand slid down, fingers curling around mine gently. Her eyes lifted again, softer now, but braver. Stay, she whispered. Not as a partner in ritual. Not as temptation or danger. Stay, as someone who chooses me, not my vow. Outside, the attendants were still chanting, still preparing, still certain of some sacred event happening behind the closed door. But inside her quarters, the chaos finally quieted. The air no longer felt like a storm, it felt like something beginning. Something real. Something she chose. And slowly, carefully, I squeezed her hand in return. I'm not going anywhere,